Welcome to On Air with Kash. Our guest today has appeared in Being Charlie, Shock and Awe, 68 Whiskey, and Beyond Hope. He's the co-host of the Incline Dodgers podcast, and he's a news reporter at KCBS, CBS LA. Please welcome Jake Reiner.
Hey, Kash, what's going on, man?
It's so good to see you. We got to work together just before this strike happened. We've reached a deal. It was some tough times the last couple months. We persevered. I know you and we're ready to get back in action, man.
Oh, yeah, totally. We were together on a shoot called Crescendo, which we were shooting a sizzle reel for a pilot. And I got to say, Kash, I did see the early returns of first cuts of it, and it looks really good, especially the part where you hit me in the stomach. That looked really great. It was fun acting as if I was afraid of you.
I know. Hey, we had that on-set altercation. We worked out our deal. It's so, yeah. The story is so fascinating. And I know we're both like history guys. My dad's in music publishing, and he actually just retired from an EPE. The character you play, you're Gene Norman. It's about the club that he had. And it was like a hotspot for like Monroe, Sinatra. I mean, we literally saw the Rat Pack. We saw Monroe. So his son, Neil, he was a kid during this era, and he was observing all this. You're playing his father. So it's like his story through his eyes. And you're running the show.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, the Crescendo was an illustrious club on the Sunset Strip. And like you mentioned, it was the hot spot for anybody and everybody in Hollywood. And they put on some of the best performances. Billie Holiday played there, and Duke Ellington, and anybody that had a great act played there. And then also upstairs, they had a comedy club as well. So they had all the hot comedians come through. And it's kind of interesting because I'm playing Neil's father in the show, but Neil is obviously quite a bit older than me now in real life. So it's kind of a funny juxtaposition for me asking him what his dad was like, what he remembers from him when he was a little kid. And so we shot that at the Catalina Jazz Club on Sunset. Really beautiful. It looks amazing. So they're in the early stages of fine tuning that, getting it to where they want it, and then they're gonna shop it around. But I got to tell you, it looks great. It's a period piece in the 50s and 60s, and it looks awesome.
I can't wait. I know you could feel the energy on that set, and just different actors who I met that day would say, no, there's something really magical about this. That's how we met. We got to talk, and I noticed that our stories growing up in LA, I know you're a huge Dodgers fan, and, initially you wanted to get into sports, and then you got more into the news. I just understood things more visually, did some acting as a kid. I was always drawing. Then it was like business and law and communication. So I thought maybe somewhere in the media, but then you knew exactly what you wanted to do when you were in Syracuse. You started interning right away. I know like you were a big Vince Scully fan. So you wanted to initially go out there and cover sports because that's your passion. But then you've had this huge successful career as a news anchor.
Right, exactly. I wanted to do play-by-play initially when I went to Syracuse, but then I sort of developed this passion out of nowhere for news, and I realized that I could potentially climb the ladder a little bit faster in the news world while also trying to emphasize sports or my passion for sports. And I kind of had I've had a weird career. Like I've been doing broadcast news for 10 years, and every stop that I've been along the way, I've kind of done both news and sports. Most recently at CBS Los Angeles, KCAL News. I did a sort of a split shift where like during the week I was a news reporter, and then on the weekends I would do Sports Central, which is anchoring their local highlights, sports highlight show. And that was a lot of fun. I got to travel with the LA Rams too in 2019-2020 season, which was just a dream come true. I've always wanted to travel with a team and cover it, but I never imagined that I would be on the team plane with all the players and be watching all of these NFL games. I had actually never been to an NFL game before I started covering the Rams, and then I went to 16 that year. So it was just an incredible experience, but I always wanted to act, and I always wanted to perform. And I had done, theater throughout high school. I had done improv in Houston when I worked there. I've done a bunch of different little parts here and there, but I always knew that I wanted to wind up and become an actor. And so I was kind of doing both here in LA, where I was being a news reporter and doing sports, but also acting. And it was a really tough balance because I couldn't really put all my efforts into one lane. I kind of had to split it. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, honestly, because at the end of May this year, I was thinking about stepping away from broadcasting and going full time into acting. And literally the day before I was going to tell them that I was going to step away and move into acting full time, they called me and they said, we're laying off all of the freelancers. So you're basically, we it's nothing to do with you, but we got to cut costs somewhere and we're getting rid of the freelancers. And I was like, weird. Like, I'd never been so relieved that I was fired. Like, I never envisioned feeling relief after that, because it meant that I could really follow what it is I wanted to do. And as soon as I turned my attention fully to acting is when I got all of these opportunities, when I got Love and Taxes, which we'll talk about in a minute, but we shot that over the summer, and a bunch of these other opportunities have come my way now that I've put all my focus on that.
I feel like we had that kind of similar background, where it was like, because my parents were in the industry, as were yours. And then it was like, but even in my case, they were really, I felt, not my parents per se, but mostly people were like, oh, they're pushing rock and roll and you're going to have a life in music. And I did stuff like that. I was a videographer for some bands when I was a teenager. I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. But I'm like you, I just loved performing. That was always fun. I was always passionate about it. I was discovering different things in college, got into more business law and communications. I still took some acting, and I was always passionate about it. And then the opportunity to work at WME came up. I was in the voiceover department. I liked it. It wasn't as high maintenance. I got to work personally with, a lot of actors that I looked up to. And then opportunities just kind of came up. We had just done the Runways movie. We were packaging that for Joan Jett, and then Joan put me in her next 2 movies. You kind of have an idea of what you want to do, but then, like you said, when this is up, then these other opportunities open up. I feel like that's how it was a bit during the strike, because really these were the last 2 things we did. We did the Crescendo, and then I did a feature film with my good friend Valerie Brandy, which ironically is about AI, and I can't wait to share that with everyone. You have this other movie, Love and Taxes, that you did get to work on. It didn't violate SAG. It was approved.
Well, yeah, that was the thing. Like, originally we were thinking that the strike was going to happen, and this was end of June, beginning of July. We were thinking the strike is going to happen, so we got to make sure that we have our I's dotted and our T's crossed here. So we applied to be a SAG micro budget project, which was one of the projects approved under the SAG strike that they were allowed to go forward with production. And what it means is that we dealt with a budget that was $20,000 or less. And so what that also meant was that we had to cram a lot into a little amount of time. And so we were in Atlanta at the end of July, in the middle of summer. We were there for an entire week. And the entire movie consists of 2 characters. And it's my character and my co-star's character, Alexis Abrams. And the 2 of us are literally the only, well, I shouldn't say the only characters, because there's some extra characters that come in at various points, but mainly it's just us 2 in every single scene. And it's a full feature movie. It's like 95 pages. It turned out to be like an hour and 40 minutes. And each scene is done in 1 take. Now, each scene is about 15 to 20 pages of dialogue, which if you translate it, it's about 15 to 20 minutes on screen, probably longer than that. So we had to do every single take in 1 take, which is the art direct, or the direction that the writer of the movie, Lloyd Schwartz, wanted us to go. And then Ken Feinberg, our director, Craig Tullis, our co-director, that was their vision too, was to basically shoot this whole thing in 1 take to make it feel like kind of like a play being put into a movie, and in a weird way, because it started out as a play. And so we basically shot the whole thing in 3 days, which is absolutely insane. We did 2 scenes per day. And like I mentioned, it was in the middle of the summer in Atlanta. It was 1,000 degrees outside. And when you shoot, as you know, and everyone that probably listens to this podcast knows, that you have to cut the air conditioning. You can't have anything, going during when you're shooting. So when they cut the air, it was like an oven inside. And for me, I sweat more than I think the average person does. I don't know why that is, but I'm sweating right now, and I'm perfectly content in my own apartment. But in this environment, I was in these thick, heavy, it's a 70s period piece. So I was in these heavy jackets, and I was just sweating the whole time. And so it's also like a challenge too, because when you're that hot and uncomfortable, it's really hard to remember all of your lines and all of the blocking. So a lot of the time I would get into the middle of a scene and I would just draw a blank. I would black out and we'd have to start all over again. Or if the camera operator bumped into the wall or there was a boom mic shadow over our face, we had to start all over again. And these things are insanely long. And I think if people know that about this movie, and again, we're going out on the festival circuit. We've submitted to about 10 festivals already, so we're waiting to hear back from a bunch of them. But I think that's what's going to be the draw for this movie, is understanding the feat that it took to accomplish this. And it really did feel like that. I mean, afterwards, we felt like we got hit by trucks. Like we were so exhausted, but also it felt so rewarding too, to be able to do that. And I saw a cut of the movie and I thought it came out fantastic. It looks beautiful. And I think Alexis and I do a really great job.
When you look and you see something complete, it seems so simple, but when you've actually personally worked on it, by the way, I sweat too.
Well, you're a human being.
There's a human side to this. But, yeah.
I'm really proud of what we did with this, given our budgetary constraints, our time constraints, and just, everybody on the crew was just phenomenal. It was a great set, similar to Crescendo. I mean, just everyone was so kind and worked so hard to get this thing done. And I couldn't be more proud of the job everybody did.
That's just the magic right there. And that's what makes what we do just worth it. Like I said, you have these journeys, but just the way that you are, Jake, you're so humble. And just even working with you, it was just such a great vibe on set. We're all there having a good time, bringing the best. And I remember seeing a lot of the playbacks, just like the scenes that you were doing on Crescendo. And there was just, you're just a star right there. Like I see that, just that look. Thanks, and that essence. No, I mean, I'm just really proud of you and everything you've done. And I know, when things ended at WME due to the pandemic, I had developed a couple pilots with some comedians I was working on. So we go to the Comedy Store and I see Bob Saget dropped in one time with my buddy hosting, Whitney Cummings, Joe Rogan, Chappelle. You just never know what you're going to get at the Comedy Store. That's when I started paying attention to podcasting, and I like the kind of camaraderie. Everyone's kind of on supporting each other. We tell our stories. You did a Dodgers podcast. As you mentioned, Vince Scully was one of your heroes and one of the reasons why, and you're a huge Dodgers fan. We all know about your Dodger tattoos. It's become somewhat of a legend, right? Out of town logo with the Dodger. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
I don't know how much of a legend it's become, but yeah, I do have one. I wanted it to mean kind of two different things. Obviously, my love for the Dodgers, but also my love for Los Angeles. So I kind of combined the two. But yeah, the Incline Dodgers podcast was something that I joined during the pandemic. When we were all kind of at home, and it was really great because, obviously growing up, I learned everything that I know about baseball from my dad. And me and my dad and my brother, we all watch all the games together, and it's really, really fun because we get into every game. But growing up, I didn't have that sort of like group of guys that were just as passionate, as knowledgeable, as up to date on every statistic that there is, every trade rumor, every, minor league call up, all of that stuff that you follow throughout the season. I didn't really have that kind of sort of core nerd group. And so I found that during the pandemic, I joined the Incline. They were already a podcast. It's hosted by Kevin Kline and also co-hosted by David Rosenthal. And the three of us, I think, do a really great job of balancing perspectives, because we all kind of have our different takes on the team throughout the year. And so if you're a Dodgers fan and you love the team and you want a really raw response to everything that's going on, because we don't, I feel like a lot of podcasts have, they got to maintain their relationships with players, with ownership, and they kind of don't really dive into some of the really tough subjects or share their really like raw opinions on things. And I think we do a really good job of that. One of the episodes that we did, because we started doing these live podcasts on YouTube, where the Dodgers got eliminated from the playoffs in the National League Division Series. They got swept by the Diamondbacks. It was horrendous, and they played horribly. And the three of us got onto the podcast after they were eliminated, and I'd never seen all three of us at the same time just let loose and just lean in to this team of how could you let this happen? And it was the most passionate. It felt like therapy in a way. It is Dodgers therapy for me, because it's an outlet for me to talk for an hour about the team that I love and not, bother someone else, a friend of mine that isn't so much into it, or a partner or whatever, like, that doesn't want to hear about any of that stuff. And I've just really enjoyed it. We've gotten, a really good, loyal listenership. We're trying to grow it. But again, it's not our, main priority. It's not our jobs. We all have other jobs that we do. And then, this is sort of like our passionate hobby, but obviously we want it to be successful. So we, do it every week. We do once a week. In the playoffs, it's obviously more than that. But if you really love the Dodgers and want to hear some real, like, raw opinions on it without any filters, then the Incline is for you.
Oh, you said I've tuned in a couple times prior to our meeting, and it's like you can really tell that you guys are having fun. It's something you're passionate about. I was born and raised in Los Angeles too. My grandma's sister, Florence Tomasian Snyder, she was the first female publicist for the Dodgers. My dad would go to the games with Jay North, who was Dennis the Menace. And, my childhood friend, one of the first bar mitzvahs I went to, he had it at Dodger Stadium. Right there.
Yeah, I've done the Dodger Stadium birthday. It's special.
Oh, isn't it? We go to games regularly, but you could just feel your passion. This is your team. This is your town. If you're passionate about baseball, and especially the Dodgers, you need to tune in and listen to Jake on the Incline.
Appreciate it.
Of course. And some of your other movie roles too. I know we were joking around last time we talked. It was about like how certain typecasts, you are a news reporter, and there's a lot of stuff that you've gotten news. There was this period when I came back, it was like Undateable John for whatever reason. I had blonde hair at the time, and I was just getting kind of I was getting typecast as like the douchey boyfriend or the a-hole or whatever.
That must feel great, doesn't it?
It's so good. Yeah, I feel like great. This is I would like it to send someone was like, oh wow, you're actually taller and nicer than I thought you were going to be. I'm like, oh yeah, great. So it's like, it was just from characters I'd played. But it's like and we talked about the movie you did with Carrie, where it was basically, you were so believable in that character. They were saying, oh, you should do this. And like, it is my job. Like, this is what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was being Charlie. And that's a really interesting story because it's loosely based on, my brother's life because he wrote it. And he wrote it with his partner, Matt Alisafin, and my brother's name is Nick. The two of them wrote it. My dad directed it. It's a great movie. I really liked it. I really liked being a part of it. They had a role for me as a reporter, and at that time I wasn't like acting professionally. I was still very much in the news broadcasting world because this was like around like 2015-ish. There was a scene where we're covering this campaign rally for the prospective governor of the state. I'm on this like a riser, overlooking the campaign party, and like it's supposed to be me, and then there's all these other like reporters that didn't have lines, but they were extras along the row, and then I had the dialogue, and so I was practicing my dialogue, and they all looked at me like, wow, like you really should be doing this. Like, this is like, how do you know how to do this? I was like, well, I'm a professional reporter. So that was kind of fun. And obviously acting in the scene with Carrie Elwes was just a childhood dream of mine because I grew up watching Princess Bride. That was one of the movies that me and my brother, we watched over and over and over again. And so to be in a scene with him was just awesome. And then to be directed by my dad is also great. Done it 3 times now. First time was in Flipped. That was the first time I'd ever been in a movie because it was his rule growing up that we couldn't be in movies until we were 18. So that's when I turned 18 and I was like, great, I can be in this movie. And a lot of people, it's sort of funny, like my dad's movies, like when they first come out, some of them aren't really received as well as one would hope. And then over time, they grow this following and this, this fandom to it that it's just so, it just they all age so well, which is kind of interesting. And then the second movie was Being Charlie. And then the third one was Shock and Awe, which was my dad's latest film that he directed and also starred in. But I got to be in a scene with James Marsden, which was really, really cool. It's me and him. We're walking down the hallway. I'm like a congressional staffer, and I'm updating him on, what's going on in the halls of Congress. And so that was really, really cool. But like all of those roles that I did, I wasn't professionally acting at the time. It was just something that like I've always wanted to do. And I never really had the courage to like be like, yeah, I want to go and do this. Like I want to do this full time. And so at the end of 2018, I moved back to LA, and that's when I started really acting. But then also I got back into news. And so I was kind of doing both of those at the same time.
Wow. Yeah. And it's just, I'm just really hearing you talk about your journey and selecting roles and getting passionate about certain times. You are one of few people that I've had on the show where I just really can identify with, and I've, mentioned a few times even during this interview, just, because my family, like my dad's family, and grandfather was like general manager. He was like real estate and car dealerships. And my dad just thought he would get into automobiles. And then the opportunity to work for Elvis Presley Enterprises came up, and then he became the VP. He just retired. They gave him a very cool, he loves his tequila. And Dr. No has left the building. He had to say no a lot to protect Elvis's image.
Wow.
Growing up with him, I mean, he had all these stories, and like he was approving like honeymoon in Vegas. And I remembered I was in the office with him when he got a clip from Fools Rush In, and I'm like a little kid, like, wait, that's Chandler. I got to like really see what he did, and I was like editing videos that I was doing with some of my friends growing up. My mom took me to set of she was working on Naked Gun 3, and I got to do this scene with like I was like a little spiky hair mullet in the 90s, and it's like this scene with Leslie Nielsen. It got cut, but you can see my mullet in the background. And so my cousin Lisa, I mean, she was like taking me around in Hollywood when I was 15 and starting to get into acting. But my thing was I couldn't book until I was already 6 foot by the time I was 14. So so they all thought I was older. And so I'd be up for something. And then Schwartzman ended up getting it. It was for Princess Diaries. And he's a great musician. I'm so happy for him, but he was a few years older. Let the better man have it or whatever. But then we ended up being related through marriage because my cousin married Nicolas Cage like for like a minute. So I was like, hey, dude, hey, you got my role or whatever. But we all become friends. And so it's interesting, those journeys, the parts we didn't get. But then it was like, I'm with you where by the time I graduated college, I was so set on like, oh, I guess the agency route. Then the Runaways had come out, and then like, hey, we want to do more movies. You'd be good in this. And so and then I have those moments too where something's not working out, and then it's like, oh, Kash, get back in here. So it's, and you never know what'll become of it. One role leads into another role, and then because of this, we developed this new project with someone. So that's what I love about our industry.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a lot of the discussion now in Hollywood, or not all of it, but like a popular topic of discussion is like the Nepo baby just topic and all that, all the discourse around that. And it's interesting because I look at it a few different ways, right? Where like I would be so naive and just dumb if I didn't acknowledge the life that I've lived and the way I've grown up and all of that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way I look at it is that if you buy into it, and if you are just so like appreciative and look up to the people that got you here, or like the family members, the father figures, my dad and my grandfather, like I've always been so proud of them. I've always been so proud of the work that they've done. I've revered them. I've looked up to them. I want to do as good, if not a better job than they did. I mean, that's sort of the motivation of it. And I think a lot of people get mixed up in, oh, well, he's the son of this person, or she's the daughter of this person. So therefore they got this role. Well, that may be the case, because that does happen a lot. But I think what I would like is, okay, fine, have that thought, but then watch me. And judge me, and like, okay, he's a terrible actor, or he's a great actor, or, I didn't expect that from him, or whatever. Like, oh, like he's actually, I can watch this guy, like I want people to have their own opinions of that. And I just feel like there are some people that are like, oh no, I've done it all on my own and I want to do it on my own and all of that stuff. And it's like, well, why don't you just embrace it? Why don't you just understand that in every walk of life, there are advantages and disadvantages. And there, in every kind of profession, you can have connections to get you somewhere, and there was your father or your mother before you that paved the way for you in that profession. I mean, there's so many different, professions that, the sons go into the father's business, or the daughters of the sons go into the mother's business, or whatever the case may be. But for some reason, it's like acting and entertainment world. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe that they did that. I can't believe that they would allow this to happen. And it's like, I mean, yeah, I want people to know. And I think it also is something more for me to prove too, whenever I'm on set or whenever I'm working on a project, is like, I've got to prove that I'm not just like, resting on my laurels here. Like, I'm going to bust my ass. I'm going to be a good collaborator. I'm going to work well with others on set. I'm going to be a nice person. I'm going to work my ass off to get this part to the way I want it to. And if after that, and you watch it and you're like, I don't really care for this guy or whatever, that's fine. But looking at it like, oh, like he only got it because of this or whatever, like you're going to tune yourself out to actually watching someone perform. And I think that that's kind of the disconnect we get into sometimes. And I know this is kind of a long-winded answer for you, but I just feel like it's important to say, because it's like, we're not acknowledging this, we're not shying away from it or whatever, but like, let's take a different approach to it. And I urge other people in my situation, in your situation, that have parents that are kind of legends in the industry, to embrace it and be like, yeah, I love the work that my parents have done. I respect the work that my parents have done. Now it's my turn and I get to show you what I can do.
Oh no, Jake. I mean, that was perfectly said. And I mean, so many areas that what you touched on, like resemble certain struggles that I felt growing up. And I mean, I'm with you where I always felt like I had to work just as hard, if not harder. Or, I go in there like I wanted to prove myself. And I think early on, because it was an interesting thing for me, like right when I started to understand who Lisa's dad was and all that, it was like, that's when I was at a small school. I did that Naked Gun thing. And then we're at the premiere of Naked Gun. And then we see, OJ's like, it's the Untouchables parody. And he's like catching the babies like footballs and doing the Heisman dance. My mom's explaining, oh, he's a big football star. We're at dinner with the family from like 2 weeks later. It's just some friend of my parents, turns out to be Robert Kardashian Sr., who we're coming back from San Jose, and I see it's the OJ, it's all over the place. And it's just, what the F it was so weird to just have those parallels. And then, cause Robert was reading the suicide note, and Robert Shapiro's kids were at our school. So that was just surreal. But then, so right before I'm starting school, I get the news that, Lisa marries Michael Jackson. So, I go to the playground with like so many questions because of what was happening at that. So I felt like for a long time, I really didn't have an identity of my own, or people kind of perceived me as kind of being, I don't want to say like a conduit, or just kind of like, oh, tell us the wild Hollywood story. And there was always like stuff in the news that I felt like I had to kind of, hey, no, it's not really like this, or this is my life. And like my parents really instilled a strong work ethic. I mean, they weren't like, oh, slack off, do this. It's like, no, I mean, it was like, Kash, you're going to college, you're going to make something. My parents always supported whatever artistic endeavors I wanted to do. But my dad, I felt like he was a lot harder on me, as a father should be. He was very adamant about my education, but it was like, really prove yourself. And I'm glad like I stretched other tools. But like once I graduated, and he's just, even just with On Air with Kash, I mean, he got me my first sign when he was just like so on board, and was just,
yeah.
So it's interesting to hear those stories, and someone who went through something similar to I did, and just where we are now.
Right. I mean, and it's like, you got to just accept the fact that, if you are born into a family, which is no fault of your own, right? You don't have a choice in the matter. Like, this is just the family you were born into. Like, acknowledging that that's the case, but also that you are going to get certain opportunities that others aren't going to get, like just flat out. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm going to be appearing in the upcoming season of Curb Your Enthusiasm whenever that comes out. And I played a little role on that. Well, I didn't audition for that. My dad's really good friends with Larry David. He gave him a call and I got the part. That's what happened. But I knew that. So when I went to set, I was like, I know that everyone's thinking that, or at least I have to assume everyone's thinking that. That's just the way I'm wired. But I know that, like, I have a lot of I have an extensive background in improv comedy. I've done this before. I've watched this show since it started, and I know kind of the tone of it. So it's my, burden, I guess, to show everyone that, like, I deserve to be here. I deserve to get this part, because what I'm hoping for is that you get these roles, people see you and they're like, oh, great, I know this person can do the job, so I'm going to give them another job. And it's all about exposure, and getting your foot in the door is a huge thing. And a lot of people don't have that opportunity. So acknowledging that other people don't have that opportunity, and that you do. But I think even the more difficult thing is not necessarily getting the part or getting the opportunity, but stepping through the door and performing and making sure that that even though it was maybe a little bit easier for you to get the role than maybe some other people, that you've earned it. And I have that mindset, and I'm not going to shy away from who my dad is, or who my grandfather is, or any of that stuff, because I love it. Like I embrace it. I love it. It's who I am. And it's in a lot of the ways why I am the way that I am. So people that want to shy away from that, they're just shying away from who they actually are. So I believe in fully embracing that.
Thank you. And actually, you kind of woke something up in me just now too, because it was, for a long time, I felt like, I did the roles, and I think some of those early acting roles coming out, I did have a manager who was at the time, and I could, the way that they were having me style my hair and just whatever look or features I might have, they would look at, my cousin's grandfather and be like, emulate this, or this is, it's with the music background, or they were trying, it always kind of made me uncomfortable. So like I felt like after I got like my first two roles, I was really it was something I just didn't talk about. I never mentioned it in the press or anything, or when I did interviews, I just veered away, and I was able to, and then this last year, some things happened that put us in the news again, just, Lisa being gone. And the interesting thing with that was, I hadn't seen the movie yet. And then a friend who didn't know, this is the Baz Luhrmann movie, didn't know the connection, just invited me to see it. And I just was like, let's give it a shot. And then I went, and it was just, I think it was important for me to just be able to, Riley and I grew up together. Lisa was like that. She babysat me, and we, I was really close with Ben, and he struggled with his own demons, and which led to his demise back in 2020. And so there'd always been certain things that I was very protective of, like my younger cousins about, and even my siblings. So for me to just be able to watch this in a room without people who knew, and then, I got to meet Austin and Baz. I didn't mention anything, and it allowed me to appreciate his work, and even just Elvis's legacy. And then 2 days later he wins, and then 2 days later my phone's exploding because Lisa's at the hospital. And then we did situations at a young age, which I've opened up about, and just being in certain circles, when I was a teenager, and just again, this is like that whole Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton era and everything. And then there's just certain things that we're finding out about certain people on that 70s show and everything, certain toxic environments. And I didn't know to the extent of what was happening, but when something gets illuminated and you're like, oh, that's why I was feeling this way. So there was a lot of, with some of the sadness and unfortunate events that happened, there's been some clarity and some closure with that. And so when people ask me things, I feel a lot more direct now, or like, look, I'm proud of this, and it was just happened at a time. Hey, my dad's retiring. I want to honor my dad's legacy and the work that he did, and he's getting acknowledged. So, and I think just what you said, that really helped me realize something. So no, I appreciate your outlook on that, because it's
of course.
And it's something I've really been coming to terms with too the last year.
Definitely.
Albert Brooks, Defending My Life. You did a little post and story about it. I know your dad directed it, but so when I started at WME, I remember it was my first day. I'd had this arrhythmia, and I was just kind of, so I first day at WME, I'm walking up, and Albert walks out. He had some cool people, and it was intimidating. And he was just, The Muse was the first movie of his that I remember just really that's what made me a fan. And then of course Finding Nemo, and I looked back on his classics, and he was a client of ours. So we came in a few times early on. I got to sit in the studio. He was recording some animation. He was just always just really just cool, and had a very intelligent wit about him, and I know a lot of people obviously respected him, but it was, we were just watching it over with the family during Thanksgiving. It was just the extent of the. I mean, you mentioned like Larry David and so many comics, just what his legacy was. And it was just really fascinating to see that work.
Oh yeah, I mean it's the documentary has gotten such great responses so far, which I'm really happy about. I got to see a sort of a premiere AFI screening of it in Hollywood, and it was so great to see it in front of an audience, because the documentary itself is a very unconventional documentary in that you're laughing pretty much throughout. I mean, it is really funny, and everything kind of stems from this sort of restaurant conversation that my dad and Albert are having in the restaurant. And then the whole documentary just kind of keeps coming back to the two of them. And then the two of them are just so funny together. It's brilliant. And you'll see clips of things that you've never seen before. And I recommend you watch it with a group of people, because it really is funny. And it's just such a really well done documentary. My mom also produced it. So I'm very, very proud of it. I had nothing to do with it other than, my association with my family. But honestly, I think it's a great documentary. It's streaming on Max. So if you haven't seen it, you definitely should go watch it. It's a lot of fun. And I think that a lot of what I took away from it, one of the things I took away from it was, wow, there's so many movies of Albert's that I've never seen or heard of, and now I want to go watch them. So it's just great. And it's really cool to see a career of someone that you may not be as familiar with as some other comedians that you might know and love. And like a lot of the great comics of today, like Chris Rock and Jon Stewart, and there was Tiffany Haddish in the documentary, and
Ben Stiller,
Wanda Sykes, Ben Stiller, yeah. Larry David, Conan. I mean, just the list goes on and on of all these great comics that are basically saying like, no, this is the gold standard. Albert is the gold standard. Chris Rock says something about how, like, if you had took Albert's routines and tried to do them, you couldn't do them because it's so crazy that you wouldn't really know what to do with it. And that's so true, because a lot of the routines he came up with on the spot, which is kind of insane, that he did on the Tonight Show. And it's just really a really fascinating watch.
That it is. And, and I heard about this because my friend, Michelle Murad, who we did this festival, she has a talk show that she does, the Michelle Show, out in Brentwood. We were promoting a festival we were doing, and Andy, their producer, Andy Waldman, we were, and he's like, he likes old school stuff too. And we're just talking about, oh, we don't really know what's out. Is there anything we really want to watch on TV? And he goes, I just saw this thing about, it's like Albert Brooks and Rob Reiner. And I was like, oh my, and he's like, oh, and I just found out it's coming out tomorrow. And it was just, before you would just see posters for the longest time. And then we're like, wait, it's out, it's available. And he says, that's what I'm doing Sunday night. And then the Muse, I mean, it's just so fun with Hollywood. You have like Marty Scorsese like coming up and saying, oh, I'm going to do Raging Bull with a really thin guy, or just the old James Cameron, like, oh, I'm going to stay away from the water.
Yeah, exactly. Don't go near the water.
I know that it was just the influence he had, and even just out of nowhere, you get like Steven Spielberg saying, "Oh yeah, he was with his Super 8 millimeter." And again, this is just, I was like in college when we had the good cameras on the smartphones, but we used camcorders when we were kids, and we just remembered walking around Melrose.
I remember making home movies with like a little camcorder thing.
Exactly. Or we would just dress up as a character and do, not as good as Sacha Baron Cohen, but there was that acknowledgement from Spielberg. Yeah. He was doing Sacha Baron Cohen stuff on the, on Sunset Strip just before that all happened. So it was really, and then there was the last thing I want to say about that was his, the quote of where someone says, you take the hard, it was, I don't mean to butcher the line, but, he's like, show me where the easy road is and I'll take it. You actually think that I see two roads, and I just see one road. Yeah.
One road. Yeah.
That really,
Yeah, no, it's perfect. It's a great way to sum up his career. It's like, yeah, Albert, why do you always take the hard road? You think I see two roads? I only see one road. So it's just brilliant.
it's great. Oh my gosh. And just anyone like, my mom, working on the Tonight Show and with the Beach Boys and just, I mean, in our family was right there. It's like, it's so that era that we're all in love with. So definitely recommend it. Jacob, that's what I love about talking with you, because I feel like, you and I, we get each other because of just experiences we've had. And then, yeah, I look at the way that you've gone with your career, you've changed courses. And then, but I feel like I'm the same way, where it's like, one thing's not happening. Hey, I'm going to go do this thing right now, or I'm going to settle
Right.
this. As a peer and as someone who does respect you and admire your work too, I just really feel like, you've always handled yourself. What you said today really helped me get through something, or it was just something I
Oh,
needed.
good.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I like about the show is like I've really, because there's people that I get to know, or we have interesting career paths that are similar, but then it's like, hey, I mean, I like it when I can learn from someone, or I hear what someone else's story was. So I'm really, dude, I am so just proud of you and everything that you've accomplished, and just even working with you on Crescendo. I mean, everyone just had such respect for you. You were so respectful to everyone. That sizzle reel will hopefully turn into a pilot. I know you're going to shine that. I can't wait to see your new film. And of course, I'm a big Curb fan. I've been watching it since it's been out. Seinfeld was like our family night. So,
Oh, I love Seinfeld.
oh gosh, that's a whole other episode. We could
Yeah.
probably go down the list with all of our favorite Curb and Seinfelds. Jake, I mean, your career's on fire. Is there anything else you wanted to just throw in, or just anything else you want to let your fans know about?
I'm good. I think that 2024 is going to be a good year. So I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing what happens, because this was the year that I really kind of shifted fully into acting, and so I'm kind of hopeful like that it's going to continue this momentum.
I feel like you and me both. I mean, it was something about like the magic of being on Crescendo, and then from there doing a feature film. And glad that we're back in action, and I feel like we've gone through our journey with our new project. So no, I think that 2024 is going to be a great year for us. And I'm so glad
Hell yeah.
we got to do this. We've had these full circles, and Jake, just really keep it up, brother. Anytime you want to come on and just talk about life or whatever you got going on, you got an open invite, my brother.
I appreciate it, Kash. Thank you for having me.
Anytime.